Hello Year 2, I am back this week with our next Roald Dahl story, which is going to be Fantastic Mr. Fox. Okay, now if you've got this story at home, you might want to go and grab it and you could read along with me and join in. If you haven't got it, sit back and relax and enjoy my reading. Okay, so we're going to do a few chapters each day of the week, and then at the end of each video I will set you an activity that you can do at home linking to the bit that we've just read. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to read the first 5 chapters today. Before we start, there are some characters in the book that I would like us to meet. Okay, so we've got Mr. Fox, Mrs. Fox, the 3 small foxes, Badger, and then down here we've got 3 men. We've got Bean, Boggis, and Bunce. Okay, let's get reading. Chapter 1 is called The 3 Farmers. Down in the valley there were 3 farms. The owners of these farms had done well. They were rich men. They were also nasty men. All 3 of them were about as nasty and as mean as you could meet. Their names were Farmer Boggis, Farmer Bunce, and Farmer Bean. Down here we've got a picture of the 3 farmers. They all look very different. I think we're going to find out more about them. Boggis was a chicken farmer. He kept thousands of chickens. He was enormously fat. This was because he ate 3 boiled chickens smothered with dumplings every day for breakfast, lunch and supper. Here's a picture of him. My goodness me, he does look quite fat, doesn't he? Got that food on the table. Bunce was a duck and goose farmer. He kept thousands of ducks and geese. He was a kind of pot-bellied dwarf. He was so short, his chin would have been underwater in the shallow end of any swimming pool in the world. His food was doughnuts and goose livers. He mashed the livers into a disgusting paste and then stuffed the paste into the doughnuts. This diet gave him a tummy ache and a beastly temper. There he is. He's so small he's having to stand on a chair. He's got his doughnuts up the top there. Bean was a turkey and apple farmer. He kept thousands of turkeys in an orchard full of apple trees. He never ate any food at all. Instead, he drank gallons of strong cider which he made from the apples in his orchard. He was as thin as a pencil and the cleverest of them all. There he is, drinking his cider. Boggis and Bunce and Bean, one fat, one short, one lean. These horrible crooks, so different in looks, were none the less equally mean. That is what the children round about used to sing when they saw them. Chapter 2, Mr. Fox. On a hill above the valley there was a wood. In the wood there was a huge tree. Under the tree there was a hole. In the hole lived Mr. Fox and Mrs. Fox and their 4 small foxes. Every evening, as soon as it got dark, Mr. Fox would say to Mrs. Fox, "Well, my darling, what shall it be this time? A plump chicken from Boggis, a duck or a goose from Bunce, or a nice turkey from Mr. Bean?" And when Mrs. Fox had told him what she wanted, Mr. Fox would creep down into the valley in the darkness of the night and he would help himself. There they are, Mr. Fox. I've got Mrs. Fox and her children in here. Boggis and Bunce and Bean knew very well what was going on, and it made them wild with rage. They were not men who liked to give anything away. Less still did they like anything to be stolen from them. So every night each of them would take his shotgun and hide in a dark place somewhere on his own farm, hoping to catch the robber. But Mr. Fox was too clever for them. He always approached the farm with the wind blowing in his face, and this meant that if any man were lurking in the shadows ahead, the wind would carry the smell of that man to Mr. Fox's nose from far away. Thus, if Mr. Boggis was hiding behind his chicken house number 1, Mr. Fox would smell him out from 50 yards off and quickly change direction, heading for chicken house number 4 at the other end of the farm. "Dang and blast that lousy beast!" cried Boggis. "I'd like to rip his guts out," said Bunce. "He must be killed," said Bean. "But how?" said Boggis. "How on earth can we catch the blighter?" Bean picked his nose delicately with a long finger. "I have a plan," he said. "You've never had a decent plan yet," said Bunce. "Shut up and listen," said Bean. "Tomorrow night we will all hide just outside the hole where the fox lives. We will wait there until he comes out, then bang! Bang, 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 bang!" "Very clever," said Bunce. "But first we shall have to find the hole." "My dear Bunce, I've already found it," said the crafty Bean. "It's up in the wood on the hill. It's under a huge tree." Here they are plotting to get Mr. Fox. Chapter 3. The Shooting. "Well, my darling," said Mr. Fox, "what shall it be tonight?" "I think we'll have duck tonight," said Mrs. Fox. "Bring us 2 fat ducks, if you please. 1 for you and me, and 1 for the children." "Ducks it shall be," said Mr. Fox. "Bunce is best." "Now do be careful," said Mrs. Fox. "My darling," said Mr. Fox, "I can smell those goons a mile away. I can even smell one from the other. Boggis gives off a filthy stink of rotten chicken skins. Bunce reeks of goose livers, and as for Bean, the fumes of apple cider hang around him like a poisonous gas." "Yes, but just don't get careless," said Mrs. Fox. "You know they'll be waiting for you, all 3 of them." "Don't worry about me," said Mr. Fox. "I'll see you later." But Mr. Fox would not have been quite so cocky had he known exactly where the 3 farmers were waiting at that moment. They were just outside the entrance to the hole, each one crouching behind the tree with his gun loaded. And what is more, they had chosen their positions very carefully, making sure that the wind was not blowing from them towards the fox's hole. In fact, it was blowing in the opposite direction. There was no chance of them being smelt out. Mr. Fox crept up the dark tunnel to the mouth of his hole. He poked his long, handsome face out to the night air and sniffed once. He moved an inch or 2 forwards and stopped. He sniffed again. He was always especially careful when coming out from his hole. Here he is creeping out, having a little sniff, seeing if he can smell any of the farmers. He inched forwards a little more. The front half of his body was now out in the open. His black nose twitched from side to side, sniffing and sniffing for the scent of danger. He found none, and he was just about to go trotting forward into the wood when he heard, or thought he heard, a tiny noise, a soft rustling sound, as though someone had moved a foot ever so gently through a patch of dry leaves. Mr. Fox flattened his body against the ground and laid very still. His ears pricked up. He waited a long time, but he heard nothing more. "It must have just been a field mouse," he told himself, "or some other small animal." He crept a little further out of the hole, and then further still. He was almost right out in the open now. He took a last careful look around. The woods was murky and very still. Somewhere in the sky the moon was shining. Just then his sharp night eyes caught a glint of something bright between a tree not far away. It was a small silver speck of moonlight shining on a polished surface. Mr. Fox lay still, watching it. What on earth was it? Now it was moving. It was coming up and up. Great heavens! It was the barrel of a gun! Quick as a whip, Mr. Fox jumped back into his hole, and at the same instant the entire wood seemed to explode around him. Bang, bang! Bang, bang! Bang, bang! The smoke from 3 guns floated upwards in the night air. Boggis and Bunce and Bean came out from behind their trees and walked towards the hole. "Did we get him?" said Bean. One of them shone a flashlight on the hole, and there on the ground, in the circle of light, half in and half out of the hole, lay the poor, tattered, blood-stained remains of a fox's tail. Bean picked it up. "We got the tail, but we missed the fox," he said, tossing it away. Here they are, looking very cross. All they got was the fox's tail. "Dang and blast," said Boggis. "We shot too late. We should have let fly the moment he poked his head out." "He won't be poking it out in a hurry again," Bunce said. Bean pulled a flask from his pocket and took a swig of cider. Then he said, It'll take 3 days at least before he gets hungry enough to come out again. I'm not sitting around here waiting for that. Let's dig him out." "Ah," said Boggis, "now you're talking sense. We can dig him out in a couple of hours. We know he's there." "I reckon there's a whole family of them down that hole," Bunce said. "Then we'll have the lot," said Bean. "Get the shovels." There he is, taking a swig of his cider. Good. Okay, chapter number 4, the terrible shovels. Down in the hole, Mrs. Fox was tenderly licking the stump of Mr. Fox's tail to try and stop the bleeding. "It was the finest tail for miles around," she said between licks. "It hurts," said Mr. Fox. "I know it does, sweetheart, but it will soon get better." "And it will soon grow again, Dad," said one of the small foxes. "It will never grow again," said Mr. Fox. "I shall be tailless for the rest of my life." He looked very glum. Here's Mrs. Fox trying to lick it. The little fox is in the background. Poor Mr. Fox doesn't look very happy, does he? There was no food for the foxes that night, and soon the children dozed off. Then Mrs. Fox dozed off, but Mr. Fox couldn't sleep because of the pain in his stump of his tail. "Well," he thought, "I suppose I'm lucky to be alive. And now they've found our hole, we're going to have to move out as soon as possible. We'll never get any peace if we—" "What's that?" He turned his head sharply and listened. The noise he heard now was the most frightening noise a fox can ever hear. The scrape, scrape, scraping of shovels digging into the soil. "Wake up!" he shouted. "They're digging us out!" Mrs. Fox was wide awake in just 1 second. She sat up, quivering all over. "Are you sure that's it?" she whispered. "I'm positive. Listen." "They'll kill my children," cried Mrs. Fox. "Never," said Mr. Fox. "But darling, they will," sobbed Mrs. Fox. "You know they will." Scrunch, scrunch, scrunch went the shovels above their heads. Small stones and bits of earth began falling from the roof of the tunnel. "How will they kill us, Mummy?" asked one of the small foxes. His round black eyes were huge with fright. "Will there be dogs?" he said. Mrs. Fox began to cry. She gathered her 4 children close to her and she held them tight. Suddenly there was an especially loud crunch above their heads, and the sharp end of a shovel came right through the ceiling. Is the shovel coming through? They're looking very scared. The sight of this awful thing seemed to have an electric effect upon Mr. Fox. He jumped up and shouted, "I've got it! Come on! There's not a moment to lose! Why didn't I think of it before?" "Think of what, Dad?" "A fox can dig quicker than a man," shouted Mr. Fox, beginning to dig. "Nobody in the world can dig as quick as a fox." The soil began to fly out furiously from behind Mr. Fox as he started to dig for dear life with his front feet. Mrs. Fox ran forward to help him. So did the 4 children. "Go downwards," ordered Mr. Fox. "We've got to go deep as we possibly can." The tunnel began to grow longer and longer. It sloped steeply downward. Deeper and deeper below the surface of the ground it went. The mother and father and all 4 children were digging together. Their front legs were moving so fast you couldn't see them. And gradually the scrunching and scraping of the shovels became fainter and fainter. After about an hour, Mr. Fox stopped digging. "Hold it," he said. They all stopped. They turned and looked back up at the long tunnel they had just dug. All was quiet. "Phew," said Mr. Fox. "I think we've done it. They'll never get as deep as this. Well done, everyone." They all sat down, panting for breath, and Mrs. Fox said to her children, "I should like you to know that if it wasn't for your father, we should all be dead by now. Your father is a fantastic fox." Mr. Fox looked at his wife and she smiled. He loved her more than ever, and when she said things like that. Here they are digging as quickly as they can, all helping each other as a team. Okay, last chapter for today, number 5, the terrible tractors. As the sun rose the next morning, Boggis and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could put a house into it. But they had not yet come to the end of the fox's tunnel. They were all very tired and very cross. "Dang and blast," said Boggis. "Whose rotten idea was this?" "Bean's idea," said Bunce. Boggis and Bunce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back into his pocket without offering it to the others. "Listen," he said angrily. "I want that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I've strung him up over my front porch, dead as a dumpling. We can't get him by digging, that's for sure, said the fat Buggis. I've had enough of digging. Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, Have you got any more stupid ideas then? What? Said Bean. I can't hear you. Bean never took a bath. He never even washed. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies and stuff like that. This made him deaf. Speak louder, he said to Bunce, and Bunce shouted back, Got any more stupid ideas? Here they are. Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there and it itched. What we need on this job, he said, is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have 'em out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels. This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it. All right then, Bean said, taking charge. Buggis, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go and fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick. The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Buggis stayed where he was with his gun pointing at the foxhole. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clanking into the wood. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. Here they come on their tractors. Here we go then, shouted Bean. Death to the fox, shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil on the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying and trees were falling and the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. What's happening, Dad? Cried the small foxes. What are they doing? Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. It's an earthquake, cried Mrs. Fox. Look, said one of the small foxes, our tunnel's getting shorter. I can see the daylight. They all looked around, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now. In the circle of the daylight beyond them, they could see 2 huge black tractors almost on top of them. Tractors, shouted Mr. Fox, and mechanical shovels. Dig for your lives. Dig, dig, dig. Good, and we're going to stop there. Okay, so far we've met the farmers, we've met the Fox family, Mr. Fox, Mrs. Fox and the children, and we know that Mr. Fox steals some food from the farmers. So the farmers are trying to stop Mr. Fox stealing any more food. So your activity today is called the Farmer's Plans, okay? And what I want you to do is I want you to think about what have the farmers done so far to try and stop Mr. Fox, okay? So they've tried to shoot him, but they got his tail. They tried to dig with shovels. Didn't quite work because the foxes dug quicker. Now they're trying the tractors. So they've tried 3 things. So what you need to do is draw a picture of what they've tried and then write about it. Tell me, what did they try? Did it work? If it didn't work, why didn't it work? Okay? Once you've had a go at the activity, you might want to post it on our class blog or send it to your teacher to have a look at. Okay? Good luck with activity 1 and I'll see you tomorrow for the next part of the story. Bye!